yeah.
Here we are on
Yeah.
a brand new edition of A Better Question podcast, very much in its infancy stages. And we just got a sweet introduction to Zoom podcasting by our friend Andres, who is here with us. Steve and I are doing it this time together. But yeah, wanted to introduce Andres. How I know Andres is I met him at church and we played soccer together. And we've gotten to know each other a little bit through both of those things. Andres has a podcast of his own that is 1,000,000 times better than this one.
Come on, Kent.
No,
Yeah.
You can't say that. That's not the way to go. It's not.
We don't know that. We don't know that. There's no quality.
Well, it's better
You
now
can't
that you're
quantify
on
it.
it. So,
Well, yeah, the quality's better. The aesthetic, everything about it, actually. So you're probably right. Anyway.
So yeah, and I was just going over this with Andres beforehand, but really we want to tell the story again of where this podcast came from. So this really has grown out of our Facebook conversations with people who get into arguments about things that matter to them on Facebook, and Twitter and Instagram just have so many limitations around actual deep conversations about meaningful things. And so we want to give our friends and people with great ideas a platform to really just dive into those. And so Steve and I will do our best to kind of ask some deep, good questions. A Better Question is the name of the podcast. So that's the idea. So without further ado, Andres, go ahead and introduce yourself. We do have some topics that we had picked out, but from there, as a starting point, we can kind of go wherever you would like.
Yeah, man. Sorry, I was adjusting like some sound stuff because I was like, this sounds awful. But now I can hear you guys really, really well. It sounds good. Yeah, man. It's good to be on. Thank you for having me. I just appreciate being able to have these kinds of conversations with people. I think more of this kind of stuff that you guys are doing here, I think this is a good start to, a solution to all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world. It's just being able to do this and just, hey man, let's talk about this. And it's okay to be wrong or whatever. So yeah, good stuff. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and we're very glad that you are our first guest. I mean, Jen was a guest. She talked about COVID-19 as a nurse, but we haven't done it as a video guest, and you're the first non-family member guest. So, big step for us.
Hey, I'm glad.
So yeah, man. The first thing we talked about, I mean, you wrote a book. Let's start there. I mean, the book really is kind of an origin story for you too. So it makes it a great place to start. So go ahead and just talk about what you want to in your book and plug it.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah. So I wrote a book this year through the help of a company called Self-Publishing School. They were pretty awesome, and I knew a buddy that worked there and got connected with them. If you're looking to write a book, I definitely would. It's expensive. It's no, that's not true. It's costly because publishing a book is costly in general. So you're gonna make that investment anyway. Heads up. So I'm just glad that I kind of knew the right person to help me out with the book. The story is a bit of an origin story. It's a story about my family moving from from Colombia in South America to Grand Island, Nebraska, when I was 7 years old, and kind of just the story of why we came here, how we came here, what happened when we got here, and then how we were ultimately able to become United States citizens. And so the reason I wrote the book really was because I half grew up in Grand Island, and there's a large Hispanic population there, a lot of Mexican friends that I grew up with, and some of them were like second, third, fourth generation. And the other people that were the white people that were there were like, some of them were like third or fourth generation Germans or like some sort of Europeans. And all of them had the thing in common where I was like, yeah, so your grandpa came here from, Switzerland or whatever, or Mexico. And they'd go, yeah. How that happened? Like, well, how did you guys do that? How did they do that? And they would have no idea. And in my mind, I remember like watching my parents struggle so much to accomplish what they did. And we can get into the details of the book if you don't mind sharing the story. I think it's better reading it, but I can share as much as you guys want. But yeah, I remember watching my parents struggle and go through everything that they went through. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way that, my grandkids, so my parents' great grandkids, will be asked, hey, what happened to your family? And that they will go, I don't know, like that this sacrifice, this whole entire thing that they did for me and my brother, and then my other brother, once he was born, when we were here, like that needs to be commemorated. That needs to be known. And whether it's, I had goals, I guess, for the book to do well, but at the very, very bottom minimum was, hey, at least the people in my family, my kids, my nephews, my nieces, my grandkids, they're going to read this book and they're going to know, for the sake of my parents, just if anything, to honor them. And so I decided to do that. It was December 28th when I started writing, because at Christmas I asked my family for permission to see, hey, is it okay if I do this? And then, yeah, they gave me the okay on the 26th of December. I started writing on the 28th of December. And then the book was published on March 7th, because that was the day commemorating the anniversary of my dad. It was 21 years that he moved here a few months before we did. But
wow. And
I wanted to just honor that date. And so, yeah, so the story chronicles the whole thing, like why we came, what happened. It is changed. It's based on a true story. So I changed some names and I changed some order of events for privacy reasons and for just literature reasons. Like the way the story progresses is better if, even though this happened actually after, it's better if it happens before, because it's a more build up of an event. But the majority of the story, I would say probably like 95% of it is exactly as it happened. Some parts had to be, or some names were omitted for obviously for different reasons. So, but yeah, it was a crazy experience writing that, and very proud of how it did and what happened. And but mostly it was when my parents, when they looked at it and they had it in their hand. My mom, I got a picture from my mom, like holding the book that I wrote. And I was like, holy crap, like this is crazy. And yeah, it was crazy. When we hit publish right at midnight onto Amazon, I was with my dad. Like we clicked together, and he was the first person to buy a copy. So it was crazy. The book is called The Cost of Citizenship. And you can find it on Amazon if you just type, you can type my name, Andres Gamboa, Citizenship probably, and it'll come up on Google, or if you just look my name up, or The Cost of Citizenship up on Amazon, it'll pop up. And yeah, it was super awesome. It was a life-changing experience to do that. And yeah, super glad I did it. Now I'm working on more stuff and kind of not as quickly, taking my time with it a little bit more, but yeah, it was a really cool shift in like perspective of how the world works, based on like digging deep like that to write something like that. So it was pretty cool that I learned that lesson. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a hell of a turnaround. Gosh, 4 months, not even 3 months to write a family story. That's it must have been. Was it a full-time job? This is your first book, right?
Yeah, it's my first book.
Was it basically like a full-time job writing it that quick?
No, I was working full-time elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I was still trying to keep up with life, but I found time. In my mind, or what I've learned in my life with people and my mentors, is like, hey, look, if you set a goal and you plan out like every day what you need to do for it, then like all that needs to happen is for you to execute that plan. And so if you have that goal and you're confident that you can execute the plan in order to get there, like measurably and actually, then success is guaranteed. Like, because you set the goal and you did all the things in the checklist. So theoretically you should like not fail. And so that was it for me. I was like, okay, December 28th. I had two options for dates. I was like, July 13th. That's the day I moved here. That would be 6 months, a little bit more spread out. Or I go March 7th for my dad. And something tugged at that in my heart. And I was like, okay, so I guess we're going to do this in a couple months. So then I was like, all right, so to write them, it's about 45,000 words. I was shooting between 40 and 50 because that's what a memoir typically is. Books are always measured when you're writing a book. You always measure it in words, not pages, because depending on the format of the book, the pages are always going to be different. Sure. And so if you do different editions, there's going to be different pages and everything. So it's just completely based on words. To give you a reference, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is about 75,000 words. So my book is about 2/3 of that, give or take. And so I was like, okay, so that's 50, let's just say 50,000 words. Okay. And I have 67 days until then. And so when do I need, what's the process look like? And so I mapped out, okay, so it's going to be at least at the very minimum a month for editing, developing, formatting, cover design. The stuff that's not writing is about a month at the very minimum, if you're moving quick and everything's going according to plan. If not, you got to do 6 weeks, an extra couple weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. And so then I was like, okay, so that gives me until about January 26th to have this thing written. And so what that means is I need to write about 1,000 words a day, which is about 30,000. And then a couple of Saturdays, I need to hit 5,000 words. And that'll get me. Wow. That's all I got to do. And so then
that's all I got to do.
Okay. So then I was like, okay, so how do I write 1,000 words a day? How long is that going to take me? And it took me about 2.5 hours. So I was like, okay, I just got to write for 2.5 hours. Then I started getting efficient because I learned and I was able to process better. I started typing faster. And it took me about an hour and a half. Sometimes I could get it in an hour to write 1,000 words. So I was like, okay, that means I can squeeze an hour in early in the morning or late at night, right? 30 minutes to wake up a little bit earlier and just stay up a little bit. I'm losing an hour, literally losing an hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep, but I could do that for 3 months. I could do anything for 3 months. And so that's what I did. That's what I did. And so I committed. I'm like, I'm unconditionally committed. No matter what happens, no matter if I go and hang out with friends and stay out late or whatever, I got to plan accordingly, but I have to write for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, no matter what. And I got to pick 2 Saturdays to just nail it until I have, 2,000 to 5,000 words. And that's exactly what happened. I just committed to it. And I knew in my mind, I'm like, if I just do this and I don't miss one day, then on March 7th, I'm going to be with my dad and I'm going to be publishing my book. I know I can do that. And so that's what I held on to, that image of my dad, and what it would look like. And I just, there would be times where I would fall asleep writing it and I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and my computer's on. I'm like, oh, I got to finish. And I finished. And then I would go to bed. But it's like that. And you just got to keep going. And then it happens. But I ended up early and it was June or January 24th. So I was 2 days ahead. And the editor was like, perfect. That's even buys us more time. So because that I couldn't control that part. So that was the part that was scary. I could control how many words I wrote a day and I could control the controllables. But once it got sent out, if my editor got sick, that was at the end of it, or whatever. And so that part was getting the ISBN for it, I still have to finish setting it up for the Library of Congress, all those little things. But the publishing of the book, as of forever, it was on the day of. And that's how it happened. I'm not a great writer. I didn't consider myself to be a great writer, but I just knew that I just had to cover the 1,000, and that was it.
So I wanted to hit on that. That's a very interesting point you bring up right there, that I'm not a great writer, which I doubt that. But in your self-assessment, I'm going to believe you. even though when I read it, I'm sure that's not the case. But why now? One of the things I heard you say early on was you wanted to commemorate, you needed to sort of lay down the narrative or the story of your folks and really your community, your family. You wanted that to move on for generations, right? Like to be passed along. And why now? What precipitated?
Yeah. Well, and we can actually use this to kind of even transition into like the other topics that you guys might have, but we can keep talking about the book. I love either one, but
but I'd love, and just thinking, like, are there like historically history issues or events?
Well, yeah. So I knew at some point in my life I was going to write about my parents' story from the minute I became a United States citizen. Like when we hit that goal, for us personally, we hit that goal the same way that I hit the goal for the book. It was like we said, okay, here's what needs to happen. Here's how many years it takes to do this. Here's what all we need. And if we cover our bases, we should, and our lawyer isn't worthless, we should be okay. Because we had a good enough case, we were going to get murdered. And so we moved here and we went through political asylum. And so we had to prove that we would get killed if we went back home, and we had enough evidence. It was just a matter of like getting it because we were here and some of the stuff is still there. But all that to say, I knew, so like after going through all of that with my parents and I got sworn in as a United States citizen on election day of all days, which is kind of ironic for some reason. And I remember thinking like, people like, I already had that mentality of how can my friends not know how their parents got here, how their grandparents got here. And in my head, when I got that certificate that I was a United States citizen, I was like, people might not the world, but like my family in the future needs to know what happened here. And I had that in mind. So then as the election of 2016 came around, the topic of immigration got tossed back into the, social media platforms, and with a little bit more fervor. The whole thing about the kids in the cages was really tough. Some of the words that Trump used to describe immigrants at the time or throughout the presidency were hard on me as an immigrant. And at moments of really like despair, I would write about that topic. And sometimes it would be on Facebook to argue with someone about stuff, or just for my personal post, but often to this blog that I have. And I would just share it to Facebook and just whatever. Well, one of the ones that I wrote, like, got viewed like 10,000 times in like 25 different countries. And I was getting messages from people I didn't know from like Kenya going, hey, I appreciate your words. Like, so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that was in like 2016. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, I have some ability to write, but I'm not very confident. Is that motorcycle too loud? Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Let me close this window.
I love those sounds.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I just had the window open, but my microphone shouldn't be catching that, but I feel like it was extra loud that time. So I was like, but anyway, yeah. So that like got me thinking, okay, maybe like when I'm passionate about something, I can write about it and people might enjoy it. And so, but I don't know. And I still had that idea of that book. And then I was I graduated. It took me a long time to graduate college because I was in and out of college for a while until I found out I was like, okay, I should just go back and finish. And so my last class I needed to finish was this rhetoric and writing class, which is a pretty basic English writing class. It was like 251. And we had to write about a community. And this is like 2018. So it's like in the midst of the Trump presidency, the kids in the cages were like becoming bigger news, and or they were about to, like, the topic of immigration was like hot at that point. And so I said, I'm going to write about immigration from the standpoint of a little kid coming to the United States, and it's going to be from my memories. And so I wrote this like short story. It's about 1,500 words, and it was called Everybody Wants a Blue One, referencing the fact that people across the world want a blue passport, which means that they're United States citizens. And so I wrote it from like that perspective. And that day I turned that in, I got an A+ on the thing. And the professor was like, this is beautiful. You should submit it to like different like competitions. And that's when I got the confidence. I was like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. Okay. Maybe I'm not a terrible writer. I still don't think I'm that great, but like, okay, I'm not awful. Like if I write something, it might be worth it, at least for me, you know, like I don't care to impress a lot of people, but I just like, it's a good form of expressing myself and I can dig deeper. And I think I can really tell this story about my parents, but I still wasn't sure. And then, yeah, I was looking up a page that I'm a part of alumni of an internship I did in college selling books door to door. And one of the guys that posted in this group of like 3,000 people was like, hey, like I'm working with this company that helps people publish books and teaches them how to do it. And so I like messaged him. I'm like, hey man, like what's this about? And he goes, well, here's how it works. And so that was that right before Christmas. And then I signed up for the course with self-publishing school, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I knew that if I took too long to do it, it might not work out because things get in the way all of the time, as life is. And so I said, no, I need a shorter, attainable goal. And then here we come back full circle. So why now? It was just kind of like everything made sense. It was still a good topic to talk about. It was that I just happened to meet the right people at the right place, and then the opportunity presented itself to actually do it. And I said, okay, if not now, when, you know, and it's never going to get easier or more, you know, I'm never going to have more free time than I do now because life happens, no kids, no marriage, but eventually, right? And so I was like, might as well go for it. And so, yeah, that's what happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really helpful. That's great to hear. There are a number of things that you said in there that I would love to pull a thread on, but I'll let Kent go first.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you guys, whatever in there sounded.
No, same. I mean, the behavioral change kind of thing is something that I'm super interested in. And so, you know, I think it's what Steve was kind of driving at, like, why now? Like you've had this idea, you obviously explained why now.
Since you were 7, right?
Right.
From I mean, ish, right? Like we need to get this down. We need to tell this story. Probably have that in whatever 7-year-old language, but just the idea of keeping track of it and remembering was huge for you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and just breaking it down and realizing you have to get 1,000 words a day and some more on the weekend. Like that's how you do stuff. Definitely. And it's, you know, crazy because a lot of us just don't do that. So
I really admire that. I do admire that, Andres. And I know it's not just that, it's your comedy, it's all the things that you get yourself in front of, and you just start to create your podcast, and you're just prolific in terms of what you were choosing to put your hand to plow on, right? Like, and let's just create. And I love that about what I've seen, you know, and I don't know you extremely well, but from what I've known and seen and just heard even now, for what it's worth, that's amazing. But
thank you.
I would love to open the page of the book now, if I could.
Yeah, man.
And what you said early on, when your parents made the decision to flee, you said you had to prove that you would be murdered if you stayed. Can you talk about that part? Because I think that just seems such an important part of your. I mean, that's your U.S. citizen out of these incredible circumstances.
Yeah, man. I mean, first off, I should say I'm not an immigration lawyer, you know. So anything I'm saying here, you know, for anybody listening,
we are by trade. We are by trade. So yeah.
So this is just what I know from my experience. Is what I'm saying.
Of course.
But so what happened was, and this is like the very, very not detailed version of the story, but my parents had helped out the Colombian government in a time of need by providing construction materials from a company that my dad owned. And so in doing that, the FARC who are I guess what you could say, ISIS of the time in Colombia. Like it's a guerrilla terrorist organization involved in a lot of drug trade, rebelling or rebelling against the government. And so a lot of kidnappings are they're notoriously known in South America. And so this is a war that's been going on for 55 years. My dad helps out the government, and they don't like that. And so they ended up presenting themselves to my dad and explaining that they knew, what he was doing and who he was, and that they were gonna kill my brother and my mom and him if he didn't stop and start helping them instead. And so the details of that are all in the book, and we can get into as many details. I don't mind sharing. It's to me, it's like I'm sharing the same story over and over. So whether you buy the book and read it, or I can just tell it to you, it doesn't matter. To me, it's fine. But yeah, so that was like how we needed to leave. And so there was a lot that went into the process, but essentially we had brought the first time when my mom and my brother and I came 4 months after my dad did in 2000. We started with this bit of evidence that was enough to get like the ball rolling. And so when we moved, we came as US or as tourists. We with tourist visas. And so we technically entered the country completely legally. Now we had no plans of returning. And so a tourist visa is good for 6 months. And so after 6 months, you're technically staying illegally. You're good for 6 months for 5 years. You can come in for 6 months, yet have to leave, and then you can come back again for 6 months after a certain period, right? So that was what we were supposed to do, but we didn't do that because if we went home, we were going to get killed. So we stayed. And for a little while there, we were living illegally while we were developing a case with a lawyer in order to be able to prove to a court that we needed political asylum, which essentially means we need the protection of the United States government here so we can find refuge here and then avoid imminent threat or death back home. And so, we had to put together the case. There had to be evidence of, the deal that my dad did with the government. We had to prove that, we were threatened, that there was communication. We had to have different forms of proving that this was happening to us, which is crazy because really, like, that's actually over simplifying so much of this process. There's a lot of misunderstanding, or I think lack of knowledge of how the immigration system works and the true issues that it has. And so, to even get us a visa, which all this is in the book in detail, and then it goes into why this happens. But to even have gotten a visa to come here was a lottery, because we couldn't go up to the US embassy and be like, hey, we're trying to go see Mickey, but also we're going to die. So we're intending on staying in your country illegally until we can figure out a way to stay. Like, you don't say that. You go, hey, we're going to Miami, and then we're going to Orlando. We told them that's what we were going to do. As kids, that's what we got told was happening. We were going to Disney World. And so everybody was in. We got there. By chance, my brother was like, where's Mickey? And then the lady took that and said, okay, you've been granted. My uncle, who works for the Colombian government, has tried several times to go get a visa to come here and see us. And he's been denied every time. Don't know. It's a lottery. So just starting out, that was huge for us that we were able to come. Okay. Then once we got here, it's like, did we get everything we needed to be able to provide proof for this? Do we know everything we need to know? Here, to give you an example of like what ignorance is like, we got here and landed in Miami and took a bus from Miami to Memphis, where my dad came and picked us up, because nobody told us, and we never knew that you could fly from Miami to Omaha. Because why would we know that? Right? So it's things like that that cost money, that cost time, that cost effort, that cost danger, because making little mistakes ahead, it was scary. We would be driving around illegally, and if we got pulled over for a taillight, we would be found out and then deported for being here illegally, and then we would go die.
Yeah, there's not a lot of
for a taillight. You know what I'm saying? And so, and this is not my story. And I write this in the book. This is not my story. This is the story of millions of people in this country. And some of them had it worse. When I went with a gentleman, a kid, at the time he was a young kid. He's a fully grown man now, but his name was Caleb Peterson. Shout out to Caleb Peterson. His parents run the Hope Venture. And Caleb was like, hey, I'm going to the border to check out what's going on. Do you want to come with? And I said, sure. Coincidentally, it was on the 20-year anniversary of me arriving. And we went down there and we met. It was just we rented a car, we got there, we drove all day, we're there all day, and then drove back the next day. So it was like a 3-day trip, just 1 day driving, 1 day there, 1 day back. The day we were there, though, was the exact day of my story, of me arriving to the United States. And we met families who told us their story, whose recordings I still have on my phone. And their stories were severely more graphic, harrowing. Like, it was atrocious, the stuff that they told us that happened to them within 2 weeks ago. There was I don't know how much detail you want. There's a gal that was there. She was 16. She was from Guatemala. Entering Mexico, they got stopped by the cops, who some of them are in the pockets of like cartels, killed her father in front of her. Her mom and her were able to escape by grabbing onto the train. And then on the train cart, there were men there who raped her and her mom repeatedly on the whole trip over. They got to the border. Her mom was killed. And then she got in requesting, because what's going on is they were lining up. I don't know if they still are, but there's lines of people saying, we need help, we need to come in. And so what they do is they take a lawyer and a judge, and they go out and they go person per person on the line saying, what's your story? Can you prove this? And if you can't, they turn you away. If you have something, they'll let you in. And then when they let you in, they hold you in this facility. This is where all these kids, and this is how families are getting separated. That's when that happens, is they get it. They're like, okay, fine. You have enough to be like, okay, we'll let you in. Sometimes they just pick a random group and they go, okay, well, kids that way, women that way, and then men this way. And then they rip off all of their things and all of their belongings. They're using those little blankets that you get at the end of a half marathon to sleep on. And there's hundreds of them to a small space. It's not a Holiday Inn, right? The kids are in worse conditions. You guys have read the news, right? And so all of this that I'm saying is because I was telling you my story and it sounded graphic and it sounded tough, but then I just told you the story of hundreds of people who it's like worse, millions. Like, to me, I'm like, man, we got it easy. You know, and what is crazy to me that happens in this country. I think.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great bridge for my question, actually, just because, you know, just thinking about the amount of traumatic or trauma, right? Post-traumatic syndrome, just from people who've, you know, the stories that you just told us at the border, your own story, but then you're around communities like Grand Island, where I have family from that area. I'm from Aurora, so I know there's a mix of family and a bit more diversity in Grand Island than there is Aurora, but still, I mean, as you mentioned before, you know, you'd meet these 3rd, 4th generation immigrants from German heritage, these sort of white folks. And, you know, if I had to guess, just knowing the community and knowing my family, probably were not very in tune to the sacrifices that were made to come here. They were different sacrifices too.
Yeah.
Like, because
it was tough back then too.
It was tough back then, but they still had the white card to get them where they needed to be.
Right.
You know, I mean, just looking European probably helped. So, you know, just different things to sacrifice, but still, in your story, and then, you know, as you've processed your own, you've seen some of the sacrifice and the cost of what it been for your parents to get here. And you're around a lot of people who are somewhat ignorant of that cost. What is that? How do you sort of not reconcile, but what has your experience been like with that?
Like, you mean
Have
like
you
when
noticed
people,
that?
when people like take it for granted, you mean, or
Yeah, or
okay.
maybe just don't have a self-understanding of true trauma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the first one second, I'm gonna turn this on because, okay, is that too bright? Okay, that's better.
No.
It's getting dark. The sun's setting and I don't have enough light in here. Okay. I mean, there's a variety of things. It honestly, it bounces back. It just kind of depends on where I'm at that day, I think. For example, sometimes people say, I'm proud to be an American. And it's like, well, you didn't get to choose. Like, you like the person that was born here. It's like,
Yeah.
you're just born here, man. Like, how are you proud of something you didn't do any work for? You know what I'm saying? I'm proud to be an American because I worked to be like, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I wrote a book in 2 months. Like, and it still wasn't as hard as what happened, like the things that we had to endure, right? So that's one thought, right? But then sometimes I'm just like, you know what? Like, it's okay. It's okay because that's the goal. So that my grandkids don't have to struggle through that. Like no, my brother had just had a baby in May 11th. I'm an uncle for the first time.
Congrats.
And like thanks, it was awesome. It's the coolest things happened to me this year. About a month before, or no, a couple weeks before, I was talking to my brother, you know, and we've lived the same thing, right? We had another brother that was born here, and he has his own story, which is crazy, of how it reflects on to ours. But like Danny and I are, you know, it's the same story. And in fact, he hasn't read my book, and he goes, I don't have to read it. I lived it. Jerk. No, he's great, man.
Read it.
He's great. But yeah, we were talking, and he goes, dude, like, I was talking to our dad, like dad, and he goes, you know, like, he was telling me about, you know, when you were born. I'm the older one, so I was the first. He was telling me like how he had spent so much money on this little toy thing that you could get, but then they were like kind of broke at the time, like they weren't like super well off yet, and you know, even like the cool stuff in Colombia, you know, was kind of out of date, wasn't as advanced as it was here. And we're looking around at Vaco, which is my nephew, and he goes, and look at this, like. And my brother does really well, and you know, he's doing well for himself, and so he's, you know, fortunately he worked really hard and understands how to do that. But he goes like, my kid's not gonna want for anything, and that's just one generational jump. Like that's our dad had to go through so much crap to help us be okay, and then it's for this reason, so that this kid could be born okay.
That's beautiful.
You know, and it was really, it was emotional, but it was to this is answering your question. Like, I go, hey, like, we did it. It's just another milestone of we accomplished. We did it. The first moment that was like that was when we, and this ties into your question, but when we moved here, my parents told us we were going to Disney. And I always prided myself in saying that my parents were super honest with us as kids, even now as adults. They were very open with us. And they told us we were going to go to Disney. We never went to Disney. And then we became citizens. And That was November of 2012 on election. Well, they became citizens before I did because of paperwork stuff. But after I was in, then that Christmas, we went to Disney World. And when we were there, it was New Year's Eve. Mickey came out and he freaking popped out in the castle. We're like, we freaking came here to see you, and we made it. That was the first time I felt like that. And then when my nephew was born and like into the life that he has, I look at those things and I go, no, it's okay to be proud, for him to be proud to be an American, because he should be, because of his grandparents and what they did, right? On both sides even, right? And so then I get on, it's the other side of that pendulum thing, right? And then there's like a middle ground where it's like, look, man, like, it's okay that you don't understand what it's like to go through what we went through. And by we, I mean the 44 million citizens that are immigrants, right?
I'm following.
It's hard for you to understand that, but at the very least, educate yourself on your story, on my story, on the story of this country, before you say something stupidly ignorant about immigrants in this country. You're more than okay. You're more than okay to have your opinions against or for it, to hold, values that are different than what I would value, and then using those values and morals to make decisions based on what you think on immigration. Totally cool if it ends up like still opposite of what I think, but don't do that without really looking at what's going on, at the not what the media is saying, not what social media is saying, like how it really works, how the Constitution, how the law of America, how immigration law is set, what really goes on at the border, what really goes on in the countries where these people are coming from, how much influence the US had on the situation that those countries currently find themselves in, right? Like in very recent example, there's probably going to be a group of people who are going to want to come from Afghanistan to the United States to run with what's going on right now, right? And they're in that situation because most definitely we came in, right? Like that's huge. And so then to be like, no, you're not welcome, even though you helped us for 20 years in this war to survive, you got to stay. Or like, like my country it's messed up because of corruption, but because of cocaine. But the first trade routes of exports of marijuana and cocaine from Colombia to Florida were created by the United States government. That you can look this up. So, the war on drugs that you didn't start at the very beginning when you should have, but much, much later, after it was too late, because you didn't care about, cocaine, as long as it paid everybody okay. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I see that and I'm like, dude, learn that, right? Learn about the role of immigrants in the history of our country. We are the only minority in the United States who participated in every single American war. That's not in the history books. That you don't learn that in American history. Or when you take world history in high school, and when they talk about Latin America, it's the Aztecs and the Mayans. Nobody remembers that we're the minority that's most decorated in the US Army, right? Like things like that, right? And so then when you read that, and then when you read what the process is currently to get here legally, and what's going on in these countries and why that's going on, and you get the full context, and then you tell me, I'm not, okay, that's fine. But when people say things are extremely ignorant, then I'm like, dude, to begin to explain this to you, I'd have to talk about something completely different before we even start to tell you how wrong you are. Yeah. That's like someone saying like, the earth is flat, or whatever, or we're the center of the universe. And it's like, okay, so before we can even start telling you why that's not true, we have to tell you about like gravity. So let's start there, right? And so it's the same thing. It's like, why don't they
That
come
is
here
so
legally?
true.
It's like, oh my gosh. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's the level you're coming into this conversation with. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant because we took a bus from Miami to Memphis. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Nothing wrong with
For our
being,
lives.
yeah,
but,
nothing wrong with being ignorant, but there is a problem
Yeah.
with being ignorant and then thinking that you're correct.
Yeah.
Right. There's a problem with, and this is probably me often in a lot of different things. Who was the person that created? There's a person, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's like, there's some people that know enough about a topic to sound authoritative on it, but not enough about that same topic to realize that they have no idea what the heck they're talking about. It's the same guy that's like, yeah, Michael Jordan, he has like the most touchdowns ever. And you're like, I know what you're trying to say, but like,
it's not the
no.
category.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know enough about
doesn't.
sports to know who Michael Jordan is and that he's great, but not enough about sports to know that you just messed that up. Like, it's the same thing.
And I'll kind of interject here, too. Like that's kind of where we're coming from with this podcast. Even, I mean, the question, if you're answering a question that doesn't matter, then it communicates that you don't care enough about the situation or the people involved to ask better questions. So like, did you come here legally? Well, when your option is between dying or coming here illegally, which again, you didn't say you did, but when you frame it in that perspective, it's like, why is legality the right question to ask there?
Correct.
Like, why, you know, it's so beyond the pale of what is considered legal that it's just like, ask a better question and then we can start answering it in ways that actually matter.
Which is, exactly right. And I think that's why when I started at the beginning, I was like, hey, I think this is great that you're doing this because it's really good to have these conversations. More of this needs to happen across any topic, whether you're talking about politics or religion, or you're talking about science, physics, love, romance, whatever. Like, this is the talk to seek to understand, to learn, to grow, not to have your mind changed or to change someone's mind, but just to say, hey, like, what do you know about this? In your experience, what is this to you? And just listening and learning. I think that's huge. So I think that's, again, great stuff that you're doing this. I think it's good.
And I think, along those lines, because you even mentioned Afghanistan, people fleeing, immigrants coming, and we all saw maybe on Facebook or there was a big photo of just a crowded plane, right?
People hanging on.
And I'm just curious. I would love to hear when you saw that, what things were you thinking? Because I've had that sent by all stripes of the political, all sides, having different things to say. And it's just, it's so frustrating, but that is the majority of a lot of people get that. And that's how they receive the news. And I know that's a problem, but
yeah,
what did you see? What did you,
I mean, it's a mix. Parts of it is, like, I see that and I'm just numb to it, because it's like, I've seen this so many times. I know this world and what that looks like, and the desperate desire and need to be safe, and like believing that hanging on to a plane for 9 hours across an ocean is safer than being where you are, and you just go, same world, different day. And it's sad. It's really sad. And then sometimes I look at it and I go, man, like, there's so many people you could point the blame to, whether it's 3 presidents ago, 2 presidents ago. Well, 1 second. Someone's calling me, and there we go. Started ringing.
Let's have him on.
That's my dad. No, I go, it's 4 presidents, 2 different parties. So even politically, this isn't like you can point at anybody.
Yeah.
And you look at this and you go, how are the people in charge this inept? Now, dude, I wouldn't want to be president. Like, that's a crazy job. Who would want to? That's part of the problem, is that you'd have to be a different kind of crazy to want to be president, and then they become president because they're crazy. And so it's like, oh no, I wouldn't want that job, and I wouldn't want a job to have to try to make these decisions, because I don't think it's kind of like, sorry for the comic relief, but it's kind of like when you take a really big dump and you're like, I don't even know what the best way to wipe here is. And really there is no correct way. It's you're in trouble. There's a mess, and it's going to be messy all around. You know what I'm saying? Like, watch out. None of this is going to look civil. It's going to be pretty gross. It's the same thing, right? I don't know that there was a right or wrong way to have done this. I don't know enough about military logistics and stuff to know. So that sometimes is the feeling of like, man, like, was there a good way to do this? Was there a bad way to do this? I mean, there was definitely a better way to do this. I know that much, but to have done that, but who the heck am I to like think I got a solution to something that's been like an issue for years, and then the other bit I think of is like, we're failing people here, and there's a sense of need to hold our government and our country to accountable for things that, like, in the same point of like the kids in the cages with this in Afghanistan, or a variety of things. How are we the most powerful nation in the country, and then this can still be happening to us? Like, we're better than this, not politically, just in general, as citizens of this country, as people who love this country, we're better than this, much better than this. And how is it possible that this is happening to us when there's so like most of the money is either in China or here? You know what I mean? Like, there's enough to go around somehow for some things that don't make sense, but then other things that do. And it's like, why isn't that? How can this be happening right now? How can this be? Because here's the thing. We're probably, as a country, as a collective nation, this is the best we can do. What's current across the board, whatever's going on in any issue, is like, this is as a 330 million group conglomerate, this is the best we can do. And it's not good enough for what we've been able to accomplish, the feats that this country has been able to reach across industries. We went to the moon. It's crazy. We're creating self-driving cars, man. We're still on top, but how is that happening to us when it's not, when it wouldn't be happening to other people who are not as powerful, who are handling it better?
That's good.
How's that possible? Because people would be like, well, this is the best we can do. No, but see, they're doing it way better. So and we're better than them. So you can't do that. You can't. That's like having the biggest house on the block, but like no running water. And it's like, dude,
how does that work?
And some of the vents are closed and windows are broken and the grass isn't mowed. And you're like, dude, how is this possible?
What is going on there?
Look at their lawn. Their lawn is so nice because they have sprinklers, because their water runs, and it's amazing. And they don't have as much money as we do.
Right.
How are our windows still broken? You know what I mean? And that's like I think the overarching thought, where it's like, I'm sad, but then it's like, oh man, it's hard. But then it's like, it shouldn't be either of these things.
So I hear kind of that in you. If I could, I just hear that probably what all of us feel, most of us anyway, if I think on our best days, where we have that mixture of sadness, but it's a different kind of sadness that I might have. My story was one in which I was born in this small town, and my parents had their own struggles, and, we have our own narrative. But then, one that touches, as you said, 44 million stories summed up in a picture is a pretty sad story, and courageous, right? To try try to bring out your family, yourself, knowing that the alternative is something just horrendous. So yeah, there's a lot of mix to that. And then I'm hearing you say like, and we're to the point where we're like, we can't accept it. Or I mean, people are,
Right.
no, in the political realm are saying, no, go, we can't, we're not going to receive these people. And it's like, we're not thinking anymore. And yeah, it does seem like we could do better. And I think we fail to think of sort of the greater good and that this world isn't about me and my closest.
And it's worse because like we went there unannounced. We went there because of 9/11.
We show up, right? Yep.
And we hold
and we commit and we promise
Yep.
this is what it's going to come about.
And we kill the guy responsible for that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying what that means or if that's good or whatever. I'm not blaming Bush either. I'm just saying like we were the ones that just showed up, and then left. And then within hours, days, it got completely overrun. And it's like, why? How is that? How did we do that? How can we do that?
Yeah.
How are we not sophisticated? We have the greatest military on earth, and that's the best evacuation we can do. Come on, man. We spend more money on military than like the next several countries combined.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, what the hell was that, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But
that's good, man.
It's tough. So there's so much going on and it's hard to fix. It's hard to fix it. So
there are a lot of people being asked really tough questions, and people that there needs to be a competency structures that someone's accountable for them. I won't go into an overarching like thought on it, but yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. And there needs to be tough questions asked because there were a lot of really horrible outcomes.
Yeah, man.
Even, for American citizens, for Afghan citizens, who, if you take over a country and try and set up their government, you're kind of putting yourself in charge of them. So, there's some responsibility there for sure.
Yeah. And it all, but you can look at any aspect of our society, and there's like, you can pick apart any part of it. So it's also like, man, there's a lot of problems too. A lot of fires to put out. And it's like, how can you navigate that? It's hard. And everything's kind of messed up. The pandemic's thrown everything kind of into a crazy cycle. Everything's super politicized, everything's super polarized, or so it seems. And then people get put into groups and labels, and it's not good. It's not good. There's not enough talking to understand. There's too much talking to be heard. It's like, dude.
And I think a drive to be with the right crew. That's, basically it's this right community that thinks the same way that I do. Right. It seems like there's more of a drive to hold on to that as opposed to being flexible or seeing nuance in our views. I see a picture, Facebook, this crowded airplane and people hanging. What do I see? Well, typically, just from my experience and I think it can be extrapolated out, people see what they think. Basically, they're thinking the way their community is going to think. Biden sucks. That's on the conservative side, what I've seen. See, Biden sucks. Now there's a bunch of unvaccinated people coming over to kill us with COVID. So I heard that today on Facebook.
Whoa.
Uh,
Yeah. It's like, what the, well,
I
but the
don't,
thing is, like, but the truth is, in my opinion, I mean,
that's
they both
obviously
suck.
that's how it,
Everybody, the last bunch of them have
everybody
sucked. Like,
sucks, right?
like
Everybody
none of them are good.
sucks.
Nothing good has
No, but I'm
happened.
just, but it's just shit like that that I think you're right. It does, it has to come down to having better conversations. You know, by you sharing your experience, age 7, talking about fleeing to this country, having to prove that you're going to be murdered if you go back, means something. I'll never forget that. And that it's stories like that that need to be told. But I think for us to have hope as a citizenry or community, U.S. citizens, we more and more need to be opened up to hear those stories. And sometimes I don't know that I always see that. Has that been your experience?
Well, and I talk about this. I keep saying this. I talk about this in the book. I talk about everything in the book. But there was two parts. There was two parts of. So the reason I called it the cost of citizenship is, and not like the price or something like that, or like something about refugees, because we moved here in 2000 and we didn't become citizens until my parents 2011 and me 2012. So it took us 12 years. So this journey, and we did it the right way, right? Mind you. Part of it was, so what did it cost us emotionally, right? So a huge part of my life, my grandmother passed away when we were here, couldn't go to her funeral because we left, by this point we had been approved for political asylum. So if we left the country to go back to Colombia, essentially you're putting yourself at jeopardy for legally for the rest of the way, or extending the time it might take, because why are you going back, right? So we couldn't. Several other deaths in the family that were difficult, right? That's what it cost us. The feeling of being in a different culture, right? And letting go of things that we needed to let go of in order for, because you only have so much room for things when you're when you're trying to hold on to some sort of identity. So you got to let go of some stuff from Colombia to be able to open up things in America, right? Christmases are different. The way you guys celebrate things are different. The creating a freaking snowman, right? Like all the way up to like apple pie. And so letting go of what it meant to be Colombian in order to embrace this culture, that was taxing. Then there was the financial cost, right? Well, how much does it cost? I mean, we did the math. I think my parents between like $40,000 or something like that, some the ballpark of $40,000 from beginning to end, applications, court, lawyer fees,
Bus tickets,
whatever, all the things, right? I think it was like 40 grand, right? And I did finance. I'm familiar with finance. I graduated with economics. And so as I was in college, I was like, wait a minute, $40,000. If my parents had invested that in the year 2003 or whatever, right? Or 2000 when we got here for 40 grand. What is it worth now? What is it worth in 10 years in 2031? And it's like millions, right? And so that's financial cost, really. Yep. Not 40 grand, but what we could have done with that 40 grand, we'd been a family of 4 living here already, having family here, grandparents. I mean, we didn't get babysat. My mom would take us to the hotel that she worked at to make the beds so we could go home quicker, because she couldn't leave us in daycare because we weren't in school. It was summertime, right? Like, hey, I'm going to take you to grandma so I can just go run this errand. Nothing, no vacations. What the hell is a vacation, right? We're going to the lake, that Mormon Lake in Grand Island. Like, that's the vacation. Like, we didn't do nothing. We didn't do any of that. And so that's what it cost, right? Learning English and getting made fun of for not speaking English well, right? That's the cost. Okay, that's just to get here. And then there's like the get out of my fucking country the Wednesday after Trump got elected. There's the police are kicking us out of a public park because we were playing soccer, futsal on a basketball court. what do? I can't stand up to him because then he's gonna like take our information and 3 of us are illegal. They're buddies of mine. So what the hell do I do? Nothing. I can't do anything about it. Got kicked out of in Grand Island. Got kicked out of a park for playing soccer on a basketball court when there was nobody else around. It was like 60 degrees on like a Thursday night. That's like 6 or something like that. Nobody was there. I'm on the phone at Walmart because my mom sent me to Walmart because I was 16 and I can drive, and she's cooking dinner, and she sent me to Walmart to pick up a spice, and I'm talking to her in Spanish and have a lady follow me around Walmart. And then I hang up and she's like, excuse me, this is America. We speak English here. And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I don't know if you were talking about me or not, but it seemed like you were trying to say something about me. And I don't know what you were saying. And I'm offended. I'm like, ma'am, I speak English totally okay. And I am not afraid of confrontation. If I needed to tell you something bad about yourself, I would have told you, like right now, you're being an asshole. And I left.
That's good.
Like,
nope.
All the time, and it's the jokes at school. It was the president telling me I'm a freaking rapist and a murderer. It's no superheroes. And I have a skit about this on my comedy stand-up routine, where how many Marvel superheroes are Hispanic? None of them. We're the bad guys. Not a single superhero. Yeah. There's a gay one, a black one, an Asian one, multiple, young, old, white variety. Not a single Hispanic. Where do I see myself as a hero, as a winner? Where do I see myself celebrated as a culture, as a brown person? Nowhere. Where do I see myself on the news in chains, behind a cage? That's what I've been told, through the images. And you got to overcome that. You just got to let that go, right? All the time. It's just like, no. Like, I promise I love this country, and having to say it in some different way and prove it in some different form for some different person that didn't need to be proven to. Right? Like when the jokes, oh, Colombian, you got cocaine. Like I haven't heard that in 21 years of living here before in my life, especially after Narcos came out.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's people wearing a Pablo Escobar shirt. That's like someone today wearing a Hitler shirt. It's like, what are you doing? Do you understand that what that man did to my life indirectly? And you're thinking he's some sort of hero or a thug, and you wear it. Oh, it's freedom of speech. Fuck off. Sorry for cussing in your podcast, but it's like, dude, come on. Are you kidding?
That was our number one rule: is never apologize for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. So, I mean, that's the cost, it's still costing me sometimes that, right? When, dude, I dated white chicks, and their parents sometimes were not fans of me, like friends who I came over, and they would say things like, oh, you don't have an English, you sound like an American. And it's like, excuse me? Like, I sound like an American? What do you mean? It was like, well, you don't have an accent. It's like, dude, what do you do? Like, oh my God. What? And educated people, leaders. And it's okay, because some of them are ignorant, like, right? But at the same time, it's like, dude, that's a cost. That's still a cost. Yeah. And it still costs. So I look back and I add up all those things, and it's like, well, but I can make a living. I'm in a country great enough to make a living talking to people online and telling jokes to strangers and writing my thoughts about how I feel about things and selling books door to door, and being involved in a solar company. And in Colombia, you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, or you work for one of them. It's like, that's the bar. To tell your parents, oh, I'm going to do comedy. It's like, what are you, a freaking idiot? Like, so, I guess my parents were still that way. I'm just kidding. No, they weren't. But you know what I'm saying? Like, when to tell people that I can do that and enjoy my life and travel and move to Portland and freely not have to worry about, being persecuted. Well, then I guess that's what that costs. And I'll pay it every day,
Yeah.
So You know, it's
That's
a mix.
amazing. No, that's amazing. And Steve and I are both coming up on our time here. We're hopefully you will be a regular guest, Andres. Would love to hear that perspective. And thank you for making, didn't know where this was going to go. And obviously it's a deep well, talking about your backstory and what that journey means to you and what the country means to you. And the values that spring out of that. Thank you so much for being here with us and telling your story and being willing to go on this little adventure with Steve and me. It was amazing to hear that. Steve, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just I again agree with that. I think it's what I gleaned from you. I know a number of times you said some of these things can be heavy things to talk about. But for me, the opposite happened. I felt inspired to hope. Some people avoid talking about what's true, right? Like, and what you did was say, there's probably shit policies going on, and some of the analogies you had of thinking about immigration policies and so on, just how you've been treated throughout your life. Those are stories of prejudice, and at the same time, in the same breath, you can say, here's the grace of it all. I get to tell jokes and people pay to see me. I get to write books and people will read. And friends, you should read Andres Gamboa's book, The Cost of Citizenship, A Family's Battle Against Persecution and Sacrifices for Freedom.
That's it.
It looks amazing. And so, no, what I received from you is just this indelible hope. And so makes me feel like you're writing books in a couple of months. I actually, I feel like there's a victory if I get up in the morning and dress myself. So I appreciate you inspiring me.
It's all right. It's all in your head. You got this. I still
leg at a time.
I still wake up late sometimes though, so it's fine. Everybody has to sleep in sometimes.
Yeah. I've got a system though,
I appreciate it. That
Thanks,
you say that. That's really nice to hear. And really I just want to make sure, like the people understand we could talk. I love talking about all sorts of different stuff, but this topic is probably the one one of the few hills I would choose to die on, because I almost had to, in its own way. And I'm just thankful that you guys are giving me this opportunity to share about these kinds of things, and hopefully the reach is solid, and people interact, and hopefully people find this helpful. But I think it's cool that you're giving people microphones to be able to speak their truths in their life. So that's cool. Good job, guys.
Thanks, Andres.
Thanks, Andres.
Thanks everybody who watched and listened. We're giving this a go. We'll hopefully have some ways to interact. I will be sharing it on Facebook, but let us know if you have any comments on the format. If you want to be a guest, let us know. We want to hear great story, and don't be intimidated by Andres. Just because he's this amazing dude, you can have some great ideas and come on the show. Just don't be intimidated.
Just come on and speak the truth. There's
right.
Everybody has a truth that's important to share, and everybody's been through the hardest thing that they've ever been through. So it's worth learning about how they coped with it. So
exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
This has been another episode of A Better Question.
See you guys. Until next time.
Until next time.